Oh, I like that. Yep. Somewhere in Detroit, there's a house. It's got a freaky basement. And in the basement, there's a woman who wants to breastfeed you. I rewatched Weapons. So I've now seen Weapons like 3 times. And the other night I'm scrolling through Apple looking for something to watch, and I see Barbarian pop up on the suggested whatever spooky movies. And I thought to myself, oh, you know what? I should go back and rewatch Barbarian now that I've seen Weapons like numerous times and it's fresh in my brain. Let's go back and revisit Barbarian because I did see Barbarian when it first came out. And I want to say, when did that come out? When the hell did Barbarian come out? 2022. I was going to say it was definitely like a COVID movie. There was no theater release for Barbarian. I could be wrong about that, but I remembered ordering it like immediately off Apple when it came out. And my memory of the movie was that it was like a solid like B, just a solid like decent horror movie. But it never really like stuck with me. I never found myself going back and like thinking about it or wanting to rewatch it. So um here I am again. This is like 2 nights ago. I order it. I rewatch Barbarian with all of the context of Weapons in my mind, kind of like how Zach Kreger likes to construct his movies. And then I was pleasantly surprised to find that rewatching Barbarian, there were a lot of things that he does, I think, better in Weapons that are still present in Barbarian. So those who do not know, Barbarian is a horror movie from Zach Kreger. It is a fairly straightforward monster in the basement of a house in a well, admittedly really rundown neighborhood of I think suburban Detroit, or maybe it's a dirty, just nasty part of Detroit where there's all these homes on the street that are completely abandoned. There's like graffiti, they're falling apart. And then you have this one nice house on the street that is an Airbnb. And in the basement of this rented out home, there is a secret door. And behind the secret door is this entire network of tunnels. And there's creepy rooms back in there with strange beds with camcorders set up on tripods, like that whole kind of vibe. The thing that was interesting upon rewatching it with Weapons fresh in my brain was that it's another movie where, similar to Weapons, I feel like conceptually the idea of Barbarian is simple. It's straightforward, right? It's a monster movie about a freaky woman locked in a basement, or who's been locked in a basement for a long time, and she's very feral and she's kind of giant. There's a little bit of a fantastical element to her appearance to make it a little bit more frightening. So on the surface, it's like a simple movie. Okay, it's a monster movie. But just like in Weapons, Zach Kreger has this way of like structuring his films in a way that takes a concept that is seemingly straightforward and simple and something that we've likely all seen before, and he makes it feel fresh. And what do I mean by structure and fresh? So, if you have seen Weapons, the structure of that film is that you start the movie following character number one. You follow that character to up to a certain point until they really start to kind of get into the shit, right? They get into the meat of the plot. And then he will hard cut, and then he will change perspectives to a brand new character and you'll get a little bit of backstory, right, to really flesh out who that character is. And then we will follow them up until the point where they're also now getting intertangled with the main plot. And then he'll just keep doing that. So like in Weapons, you have this cast of like really good characters, and I think that the characters in Weapons is better than in Barbarian. And I think the execution in Weapons is better. However, we'll stick with Barbarian. So in the opening of the film, we're following the character of Tess, who is a younger professional woman who is traveling to Detroit for a job interview, and she has rented out the house on the street that is all spooky and run down. And when she shows up to this house in the middle of the night during a rainstorm, so the visibility is limited, she's not able to actually see the fact that all of the other houses in this neighborhood are abandoned and they're all just like falling apart. And when she arrives to the house is already occupied by a man played by Bill Skarsgård, who claims that he rented the house through, I forget the name of, there's some other like website or app that he has rented the house through. And so the intro of the film is kind of like more of like a horror that is steeped in reality. And throughout the movie, there's themes of, men controlling women. Um, I think also to me, it's the idea of like people that are presented with multiple red flags who basically through mental gymnastics like ignore them. They choose to ignore the red flags. So in this kind of act 1, when the character of Tess arrives at this house, she's greeted by Bill Skarsgård, who is staying there, who is really well cast, because even Zach Kreger, I was watching some behind the scenes thing, and Zach Kreger was saying that, Bill Skarsgård has this look where he's attractive in the conventional sense, but there's also something about him at times that can feel a little bit off. And there's like a potential danger maybe lurking beneath the surface. And I think that Bill Skarsgård, in his limited role in the movie, does a really good job of being this very welcoming person to Tess. But he also just is able to like work in these little moments where you're just like, I don't know if this guy is good or if he's bad. So in Act 1, it's more of a thriller or a horror that is steeped in reality, right? So you have this female character who is, by all accounts, in a terrifying situation for a woman, which is like showing up to an Airbnb by yourself in the middle of the night, and there's already a dude staying here. And initially, she's like, "I'm gonna rent a hotel. I'm just gonna leave. It's fine. You can stay here." And he's like, "Well, you really shouldn't sit out in your car in the rain. This is a really sketchy part of town. Why don't you just come in the house and you can look for a hotel on your phone in the house, right?" And eventually she accepts, and she's like, "Okay, yeah." And she comes in, and he is, he's trying to be hospitable towards her, where he's like, "Oh, there's like food here. There's hot tea. I'm gonna make myself a cup of tea. Do you want one?" And she's like, "No, I'm good." But then he'll be like, "Okay, well, listen, I'm gonna make myself one. I'll just make you one too." Right? So things like that, where it's like, she directly says to him, "No, I don't want tea," and he's still like, you can't tell if he's just trying too hard to be nice to her, or if there's like this creepiness where he's just going to ignore the fact that she refused the tea, and he's going to make it anyway. So that's Act 1, is the two of them, and there's this constant tension between the two of them, and then she ultimately ends up having to stay the night in the house with him. And so there's that tension where it's like, okay, at some point they're going to have to go to bed, and then what's going to happen? At the end of Act 1, by whatever means, um, Tessa's character enters the basement of the home, and she finds the secret door. There's like a rope pulley in the wall where she pulls it, and a big slab of the concrete foundation just kind of like opens. And then from there, the plot really starts to pick up. The horror elements really come forward. And in Zach Kreger fashion, that is when he pulls the plug and you remove yourself from these characters, and we completely shift focus to another character, who's played by Justin Long. I think when you jump, you're presumably, if I don't know if it's like maybe a few days or maybe a week, um, into the future, and now you're seeing him, and he's all the way out in, like, I think he's in California. He works as probably like a studio executive, someone who is in Hollywood and works in show business. But his character ends up having to leave Hollywood, and you find out that he is, in fact, the owner of this random nice house that's just plopped in the middle of this complete shitstorm of a neighborhood on the outskirts of Detroit. And when he arrives, he finds, the luggage and things of that from the characters from Act One, who are just basically, I will say, they are trapped wandering the maze within this basement. And so you completely shift, and then you get a little bit more perspective from him, and then he ends up, like I said, he ends up at this house having to stay there because he has nowhere else to go, and he's the owner of the property. And then because he finds belongings of other people, he's just like, what the fuck? Is there someone else staying here? And then he ends up finding the basement. And then so now we go back into the basement. We're kind of recovering environments that we've already seen. And we already have an expectation of what he's going to find in the basement. But his character gets you to that point of familiarity. And then, similar to Weapons, it takes you beyond that point. So now you're kind of following him, and you see a bit more. You learn a bit more. The plot moves forward. And at some point, we'll call it like Act 3, we hard cut again, and now we're way in the past, like 20, I would say 20 or plus years in the past, where we're now following the original owner of this home. And he turns out to be I don't know, he's not a serial killer, but he is a kidnapper of women. And you kind of see him in his day-to-day life. You see him go to the store, and he's buying, belongings for caring for like a baby. He's getting like diapers, and he's getting waterproof mattress covers and things like that. And then, sort of like a direct nod to, I don't know if you've seen like Mindhunter, but Mindhunter sort of follows the BTK killer from Kansas City. And then that show just disappeared. R.I.P. I think it's in a nod to the BTK killer. You kind of see this dude in the past who's the owner of the house. He goes to the store, and then as he leaves, he sees a woman in the parking lot, and she's getting into her car. She's loading, I think, groceries or something. He follows her home, and then he gets out of his car, and he puts on like a plumber's uniform, like a Michael Myers blue jumpsuit with the name tag. Knocks on her door. He's like, yeah, I've been sent from some company. I forget what the reason is, but he kind of like smooth talks her, and he's like, yeah, we're just looking into all the houses on the street. We've heard there's been some like water pressure issues or whatever. And she just lets him in. And then when he is in her bathroom, he unlocks the window, which I think is what like the BTK killer did. He would like pose as a utilities employee or something. He would get into someone's home, unlock a window, and then he would come back. But the thing that I like about the movie is that's all that Zach Kreger shows. He just shows enough where the dude unlocks the window, and then he leaves, and he's like, yeah, everything looks pretty good actually, but I'm sorry to bother you. Thank you for your time. And then we cut right back to the present day, where we have our characters from Act One now merging with Act Two, Justin Long's characters, and now we're steamrolling ahead towards the ending. But now you have the full context. You have the context of why is there this feral, I don't even know how you describe the monster of the movie, which is basically like this giant feral cave woman looking thing, and she she really just wants to be a mother. There's like a scene where they Justin Long finds a room down in these tunnels where there's just a like an old tube television, and it's playing a VHS tape of like, I think it's like an educational video for mothers on how to like breastfeed and stuff like that. And yeah, there's like scenes where the the cave woman lady's like trying to like force feed the characters like her breast milk through a bottle. I don't know. Shit gets like kind of goofy and weird. Um, but you get context as to what she is, why she's down there. And to double back, the point where we only see the creepy kidnapper man unlock the window. What I meant to say was that I appreciate the fact that they don't feel the need to like show the scene of the guy returning to the house to like break in through that window, kidnap this woman. They leave a lot of gray area, but you know enough to understand the fact that this dude back in like the 60s or 70s was kidnapping women and keeping them locked within this secret area of his basement. And there was presumably a lot of children that were born down in these dark tunnels, and I think that this monster woman is supposed to be one of those children. And that's essentially, yeah. I've realized I've spoiled a lot. I've broken my rule of not spoiling, but yeah, what I loved was the fact that, yeah, you watch Weapons and then you see the structure of Weapons, and then you go back and you rewatch Barbarian and you realize he was kind of doing the same thing, but he just does it way better in Weapons in terms of, I think the plot of Weapons is much better. It's much more interesting, whereas Barbarian I think is closer to just being a straightforward horror film. But it's done smartly. As I said, I like the fact that he structures his movies where you're following a character and then you switch off and you go to a new character. You get a little bit of backstory. You get some scenes where you really get to establish who that character is. Then you push that character so that they start tying into the main plot of the film, plus a little bit more, right? And I think when you do that, it helps the movie feel like it's more about the characters of the movie versus like the scary shit. Like the first time I watched Barbarian, I just was approaching it and watching it and going, "Yeah, it's a spooky monster movie. There's like a freaky chick in the basement, whatever." But then when you go back and I rewatched it, I realized I was like, "No, this is more about the characters and the character of Tess, who is um at some point she reveals that she's been in a relationship with a guy and it's not going well and he's not supportive and he's like a huge asshole, but she continues to go to bat for this dude, and despite all these red flags, she just kind of keeps moving forward. And then she kind of enters the same situation with Bill Skarsgård's character in Act One, where there's just a lot of like subtle red flags about this dude that she's just willingly going to share a house with, like this guy that she just met. And she's just, yeah, she just seems very passive. And she despite, even like when she goes into the basement, and it's like there's so many red flags, like you found the secret room, it's freaky as hell. um you don't need to continue exploring the freaky sub basements of this home, just get out. but she just kind of stubbornly has to keep plotting forward. And then I think my favorite character of the movie is Justin Long's character, who, as I said, he's like a Hollywood executive. He is accused of sexual misconduct by a woman at work, and he's basically fired, and so he has to leave. He has to leave LA. The only thing that he has is this house that he bought. It's way out in, in Detroit, and he fixed it up, and it's an Airbnb. But the thing that I love about his character is that it's just they stay very honest with his character. Like, he is just an irredeemable asshole, um who is given plenty of moments throughout the film to, like, show some growth, or a lot of movies I think would have him end up showing a better side to himself, and maybe, by the end he like sacrifices himself to save another character or something like that. And in this movie, he just doesn't. There's a moment about like three quarters of the way through the film where he is down in this tunnel system beneath the houses, and he's found a gun, but he's so panicked and he's freaking out, and he's just trying to get himself out of the basement that he accidentally comes across Tess down in the basement, and just in his panic he shoots her, like, in somewhere in the abdomen, and she falls down, and you're like, oh my god, he just like killed this chick by accident. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And for a moment you're like, he's just gonna leave, he's gonna be like, oh fuck it, I'm out. But he does end up helping her. He helps pick her up, and he puts, her arm on his shoulder, and he helps get her out of the tunnels and out of the house. And you're like, okay, so maybe throughout this traumatic arc that he's been on in this film, maybe his character is going to evolve, and he's going to become a little bit more sensitive to other people. And then at the end, like, he literally he literally like throws Tess's character off of a water tower, um in order to create a diversion for him to escape. So I love the fact that he's just unapologetically an asshole, and they stay true to that character throughout the movie, and I appreciate that honesty. And now that brings me to the ending. So here's why Barbarian gets I would say a B. It's not a bad movie by any means at all. I think it's a super solid horror movie. You can do way worse in terms of spooky movies. If we think, I'm always comparing it to Weapons. Sorry for that. But if we picture like the very very ending of Weapons, which I think you could classify as goofy, right? I'm talking about the sequence where you have a gang of children chasing an old woman through a suburb in broad daylight, and they're like crashing through windows chasing her, and she's just running. And then, the movie's self-aware where there's like a dude mowing his lawn, and then he like stops mowing, and then you see the old lady run between the houses across the street, and then you hear all the children running behind him, and they catch up to her, and they rip her to pieces. And it's, you could definitely say, that's kind of goofy, right? It's a little bit strange. But for that film, like, that ending made sense. It was justified. I think it was earned, and it was a satisfying end to the movie. As ridiculous and as absurd as it was to watch, it was just like, fuck yeah. That felt like the right ending to that movie. I think Barbarian has another ending that just felt, it just feels out of place, because for the most part Barbarian takes itself pretty seriously as a film. Like, there's not a lot of, trying to think, there's not a lot of like goofy shit that happens in Barbarian. Like, it's pretty straightforward. We're making like a serious horror film. Whereas Weapons had a lot of moments that were like, throwing a wink wink to the audience kind of a thing. And I'll just say this. So it just it breaks away from what was a very creepy, claustrophobic, kind of focused, nuanced horror movie. And it turns into like this weird, like actiony, oh, the monster woman's out of the house now, and we're all running around the neighborhood trying to run away from the monster. And there's a scene where the main characters meet up with this like homeless guy who lives on the block. And the homeless guy apparently is like completely in the know about who this woman is. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, she always comes out at night. And it's like, okay, that's weird. She leaves the tunnels, I guess, and she just comes out at night and wanders the streets. But there's a scene where they're in this homeless dude's like wherever he's like shacking up. And the monster woman like busts, I think it's like stone, like a concrete wall. It could have been wooden. I don't know. I just remember like I'm trying to picture the scene. She literally bursts through the wall like the Kool-Aid man while the characters are having this like kumbaya moment around the bonfire, which it just felt like really weird. And then yeah, the whole ending, they're up on a water tower and Justin Long pushes Tess's character off the water tower, and then the monster woman jumps off of the tower after her, and neither one of them die, despite the fact that Tess has already been shot by Justin Long's character. So she has a gunshot wound to her abdomen. She gets pushed off a fucking water tower. Somehow, through the mysteries of science, the way that the monster woman and Tess land on the concrete, the monster woman is like underneath Tess. So somehow the monster woman caught up to Tess and was able to get under her during their fall. And they land and neither one of them are dead. So I was like, okay. It felt weird. So that's my big and probably my only complaint with Barbarian is that the ending just felt like very disconnected and weird from the rest of the movie. It wasn't satisfying. It didn't really match with the tone of the movie. I thought that the homeless guy character who just kind of like shows up at the end of the movie to just drop a bunch of like exposition on the main characters, and then the monster lady just busts through the wall like the Kool-Aid man. It just felt like tonally um disconnected from the rest of the movie, and yeah, unsatisfying is what I would have to say about it. But overall, I think Barbarian is a really good horror movie. Like I said, you can do much, much worse than Barbarian. The performances are solid. Bill Skarsgård, for his fairly limited role in the movie, does a good job. It's good to see him outside of the Pennywise makeup getting to actually act, and the Nosferatu. I feel like everything I see that guy in, he's got like a shitload of makeup on him. Um, and Justin Long. I haven't seen a movie where Justin Long is like a bad dude. Ish. He's like bad ish. He's definitely kind of shitty. We'll say that. He's a shitty character, but I think he does a really good job of like there's times where you almost root for him, but he's still just kind of a piece of shit. But he does a great job. He's my favorite character. I thought the actress who played Tess, I'd have to look up her name. Georgina Campbell. I thought she was fine. Just a fine, you know, female lead horror movie performance. Nothing crazy to write home about. But yeah, if you haven't seen Barbarian, highly recommend. It's not as good as Weapons, but it is still worth watching. Um, I'm gonna have to look up everything that Zach Kreger has done because now I'm wondering if there's other movies that he's made that I haven't seen that I want to. So what does he have here? He's got Weapons. He has something called Companion, which is looks like it's about. Oh, no, he didn't write it or direct that. He produced that. So let's ignore it. So he has Weapons. He has Barbarian, and then he has Miss March. I'm not gonna watch that. That looks weird. And he's apparently doing the Resident Evil movie. He's the next in line to attempt to reboot a franchise that is seemingly unadaptable from everything I've seen. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because again, I like the way that he structures his movies. He's able to take concepts that are fairly straightforward. They're paths that we've been down before in the horror space, but the way that he presents them and the way that he structures his narratives make them feel fresh, make them feel interesting and unpredictable. So they're fun to watch. Anyways, that's all I got. If you're still here, I thank you. I'm going to make some more gameplay videos probably over the weekend or next week, so look out for those. Peace.